Uh, Good morning, everyone. Actually, I'm very happy to be here. Welcome everyone for an amazing day of sessions, discussions, and conversations. My name is Srikanth Tirumala. I'm the CEO and founder of Hooper Labs, and I'm also the TSS 2021 Speaker Committee Chair. I think we're going to have a really wonderful session. The topic for today's discussion is sustainability in the boardroom. We have an amazing set of speakers, and to moderate them, I have my own dear friend and colleague of mine, Mr. Ravi. Ravi is an entrepreneur, mentor, investor, and corporate and government advisor in startup ecosystems across the world. His latest stint was the CEO of T-Hub and Chief Innovation Officer of State of Telangana. He's on the global trustee of TIE, and I'm very certain that Ravi will bring his insights and also will be able to elicit amazing outcomes from the panel that we have in front of us. Ravi, over to you. I would probably introduce the speakers and probably take it from there. I'll join you at the end of the session to be able to go ahead and help you if in case you have any questions. Okay, thank you very much. Looking forward to a great session.
Thank you, Srikanth. Thanks. Good morning, good evening, everyone. It's really nice to have you join us at the beginning of today's sessions. I am joined, as Srikanth said, by a very eminent set of panelists. Mr. Nawshir Mirza is an eminent board member on several boards, especially in the energy sector. I'll ask each of the speaker to do a little bit longer introduction of themselves in the context of the topic today. We also have Ms. Deeksha Vats, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer of the Aditya Birla Group at the group level. We have Mr. Saurabh Goel, who is the President of Havells. So each one of them brings a very different perspective to this important conversation, because TIE has traditionally worked in the tech sector, and that too in the tech sector, especially as it relates to profit maximization, shareholder, value creation, and so on and so forth. And that's been our, outlook so far. But this is probably the first time that we are having a conversation around a much more holistic view of how corporations should function, how the board should govern such corporations, and so on. So, we have Nawshir, who brings the evolution of the thinking in the boards. We have Deeksha, who talks about how a very large Indian conglomerate is institutionalizing the charter of sustainability within this organization. And Saurabh, of course, has a ringside view of how operations of that organization is actually helping with sustainability efforts in Havells. With with those thoughts, I would let me just set the context a little bit more. So Milton Friedman talked about shareholder value creation. That was kind of the paramount reason why corporations were functioning. And over a period of time, that is something that has evolved to actually have E, which is environment, S, which is the social, and G, which is the governance. All three of them coming together to become a complete fiduciary responsibility of the board as well. And so there are ESG reports that are being put together so that boards can operate off of that to see where we are and what way we need to get to, and so on and so forth. There's already also Section 166, which is probably a unique law in India, that talks about this in a much more holistic way to begin with. So it already sets the context. It's not just shareholders; they talk about stakeholders. And when you talk about stakeholders, it's the shareholders, it's the community, and much larger. So the board is actually charged with the responsibility to exercise reasonable care, skill, and diligence for all three of them, and that's an important distinction that is coming about. But also at the same time, it's a very new charter, a new set of responsibilities. Not everybody knows what they need to be doing as board members, and neither does the government know exactly whether they are actually complying as much as they should be, because there are compliance and risks that governance is always concerned about. So there are things like business responsibility and sustainability reporting, the BRSR kind of reporting, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of those things that are in place. Some organizations are way ahead of the curve, and they did it whether there was a law or not. But then there are others who are kind of trying to grapple with the new requirements, and the others who are completely unaware of this being a requirement at all to begin with. So I think we have that as a representation of the entire audience today. So we feel that not only will we have a good discussion, but also leave you with certain questions in your mind, certain insights that you can further develop on your own as you begin to go down this path in each one of your organizations. So with that, I would like to ask a few questions of my panelists to begin the conversation, and then we will open it up to the audience depending on how much time we have. So with that, I would like to ask my fellow panel member Nawshir. He had written a very interesting article in the newspaper called "Ostriches in the Boardroom." So, what are the boardrooms doing in terms of this larger agenda, and why are they taking so long to get there? I guess that was the gist of his article. Nawshir, please also introduce yourself a little bit before you do that in the context of this. Nawshir, you're on mute.
Indeed, I am. Thank you, Ravi. Hello, everyone. To introduce myself, let me just say what are my experiences relevant to the topic we are going to be speaking on. And Ravi said I've been on the boards of some companies that are relevant. One was a power company, Tata Power, which I retired from recently. Another was an energy storage company, Exide, the battery company. You all know of that. And the third is Thermax, which is a company that makes the equipment for generating electricity and stuff around that. I also sit on the board of TERI, which is a not-for-profit organization focused upon sustainability. Most of you, if you're interested in this sector, would have heard of TERI. So those are my credentials for standing up in front of you and speaking. Coming to Ravi's question, my own experience of board work in the last 20 years, more than 20 years that I've sat on the boards of different companies, has been there are certain things in this sphere that boards are focused upon. The first is anything that will enhance shareholder value. And in this context, it is how do you reduce the consumption of resources, because that directly flows into the bottom line and enhances your shareholder value. So that's an obvious one. Every board is keen upon it. A great number of companies, not boards, I don't think the boards even give the time of day to this point, is greenwashing. So increasing number of companies posture to be green. And perhaps the most egregious examples I can think of are all the luxury services and goods companies that on the basis of, for example, the most expensive luxury hotels that survive because people consume much more than is good for the planet. Say we are green because we don't wash your towel every day, and that's only if you ask us not to. Let me give you an example of a major Indian bank. 2 or 3 years ago, I remember reading a headline on the front pages of the pink papers. So-and-so bank goes green. And what was the greenery this bank had done? They said we are no longer going to put little bottles of drinking water on everyone's table, the plastic ones. We're going to replace them with disposable paper cups. When I saw the headline, I thought that they're going to say, we're not going to give loans to companies with big carbon footprints, but this is their symbolic tribute to greenery. So a lot of companies are focused upon that. But every business model is predicated upon growing the top line. And it is the growth of the top line that has put us into the challenge of sustainability. So the real issue every board should be discussing is, how do I enhance shareholder value without growing the top line? Indeed, by shrinking the top line. Because you will only save the planet if you reduce consumerism, not encourage it through various methods and techniques. And we're well past the stage where we have the luxury of saying that will eventually happen. As you know, we've passed the tipping point for climate change. The world is looking at a forbidding future. And this is the time all businesses need to pull together. Ravi made a reference to Section 166 of the Companies Act and later other provisions. And I'll quote one phrase out of the Companies Act, the Indian Companies Act. It says, boards shall balance the interests of all stakeholders. So it doesn't put the shareholder at a higher plane or at a preeminent level any longer. Every stakeholder is on an even plane. So the purpose of business is no longer to make profits. That is what the Indian Companies Act says. There are many challenges to ever achieving what this noble intent of company law is. But I think the boards need to be focused much more upon sustainability, which currently they are not, because they still have the challenge of how do you address the issue that is before us. There is a certain amount of communication that is now required on sustainability. And if you read the integrated reports companies put out, the business responsibility report, most of those have been written by their PR department. I don't see those reports ever discussing the real impact upon the planet of that company's behavior. Ravi, that's a summary of my answer to your question. You're mute, Ravi.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Nawshir. That was very insightful and a good roundup of where we are in terms of board discussions, in India, especially that you have seen firsthand. So, until we started having these discussions at TAI regarding sustainability, we didn't know that there was a title such as Chief Sustainability Officer at an organization. And that's something that, Deeksha has been doing now for quite some time within the group. And so first I will ask her, what's the role of the Chief Sustainability Officer that you have been discharging at the moment and have been for several years? And how do the business goals align with the sustainability goals as far as, your day-to-day work goes on? Deeksha?
Thank you, Ravi, and thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. Early morning, we are all here and talking about sustainability. So I think that itself is kind of, it's such a good sign that we are having this sustainability summit and that I'm here talking to you. I work for Aditya Birla Group, which is one of the very prominent Indian business groups and interests in very diverse sectors, right from cement and aluminium and chemicals on one side, very manufacturing focused, to Aditya Birla Capital, Aditya Birla Fashion and Retail. And when we talk about, if I was to just pick up from Nawshir's point on how do you, are we having these conversations and are we taking cognizance of the interests of all kinds of stakeholders and not just the shareholders? I think that ship has sailed some time back, and I think all large corporates are taking cognizance of that how your ability to sustain is not going to be only dependent on how much money you make. What would also matter is at what cost, and that's what things like integrated report do for you that you do talk about. And Nawshir, it's not that they are written by the PR departments. I can assure you that in Aditya Birla Group of Businesses, the integrated reports done by Grasim and Hindalco have not been written. So, of course, communication team plays a very big role because that's what is their job, to be able to bring out very clearly these, in whichever way we communicate, whether we speak or we write or we come up and represent companies in panels like this, so that both internal, external stakeholders understand what we are doing is done through these sustainability reports. To your question, Ravi, on and this is in a way a segue to what head of sustainability would do. A head of sustainability would be this catalyst who brings people like corporate communication, people like who are in manufacturing, the company secretary, the risk officers, the CSR team, the HR team, everybody together on, are we recognizing what all aspects we should be looking at if we want to be responsible and resilient corporates? That, are we recognizing what is needed for our ability to sustain in times to come? So that's what people like me and my fellow heads of sustainabilities in our businesses do. So looking at, and now what has happened is, with investor community wanting, not just investing and lending community or even stock exchanges. I mean, you would have seen how National Stock Exchange did a report last year assessing companies on their ESG, and they added another aspect called P, that what are you doing on policy advocacy doing. So working on ESG aspects means coming together of colleagues from all parts of the business to recognize what all are those material aspects. At Aditya Birla Group, we're looking at what we're calling it a four-dimensional approach. So if I am to work on these aspects, so on E, S, and G, what are the material issues for a business? Because it would be different for, say, for a Hindalco from an Ultratech, because it would vary according to your sector of operation, your geography of operation, where you fit in the value chain. So what your value chain expects from you. So if you're a B2B business, you would look at it differently from, say, if you were Aditya Birla Fashion and Retail, which is a B2C business. And then, of course, how aware are you of how well you're doing now versus how well you would do 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line. So I hope that answers, and I can see Ravi's put his hand up, and so I'm going to hand it back to him, and thank you.
Thanks, Deeksha. So one of the things that I heard from you is that you're not looking at thinning the top line as much as, definitely continuing to help build the top line, but in a much more integrated way, by bringing all the different stakeholders within the company and outside the company to work together in making that happen. So the business goals are indeed aligned with the sustainability goals that you've set for yourselves, not by the PR department, but by the company as a whole. Great, thank you. So let me move on to the third panelist, Mr. Saurabh Goel. Saurabh, my question to you is, ESG has now entered the boardroom parlance. How is it being measured, and how does it compare with the enterprise risk management, which is generally covered by the COSO framework?
Thank you, Ravi, and thank you for inviting me. And I feel terrible coming at a time where the excitement had built up with Deeksha throwing the gauntlet to Nawshir, and I kind of petering down the conversation. But anyway, let me just add a few thoughts. Before that, let me thank the TIE team for inviting me on it. And as you would see, if there's anybody with least credentials to be speaking on this topic, it is me on this. However, I did my engineering way back in 90, did my management, And then in these intervening 26 years, I've worked in interesting fields of fast-moving consumer goods. A large part of it was in telecom. And for the last 6 years, have been with Havells, leading the electrical consumer goods as well as, the traditional electrical goods, and serving here as the president. So in a way, you're right. I mean, I've, been in the trenches as well as on the other side of the table, and in a way can bring in a little more perspective, both from my experience within telecom and lately in the electrical goods industry. So Ravi, you're right, and all the panelists have, kind of spoken about that ESG or whatever, other name you call it, it's firmly there, has entered the, board parlance in whatever way it was. But I would like to go in a bit of history and say how I have seen its evolution, and, once we understand that, one would probably be on firmer grounds that this is here to stay. Probably the thing started about 2 decades back through enterprise risk management, where, a committee headed by Kumar Mangalam Birla in 2000 set the course for what are the risks that are there. And all these environment, health, sustainability, ecology, social, all these issues were probably, kind of, along with a lot of business issues, were handled under the gambit of risk, right? Well, 2004, 2008, various committees kept on coming, Narayan Murthy Committee, JJ Irani Committee, etc. And then lately in 2009 is when, regulatorily, it was made, kind of recommendatory, not regulatory, recommendatory that, a person starts, the board starts commenting on their risks. And in 2013 is when ERM, firmly came, was established, and it was mandatory for the boards to, kind of give their thoughts and, start reporting on these parameters. So a lot of corporates, including Havells and Airtel before that, where I was working, had adopted ERM as a part of their strategic planning process over the times. And, one of such frameworks is the COSO frameworks, which is the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations, Institute of Chartered Accountants in the US, and many other such institutes started that. And, we follow that as well. So in 2013, they came up with the provisions, and in 2017, they revised it. But let's fast forward it to the present time, and passing through, full integrated. Before that, there was a triple bottom line reporting, and now to full integrated reporting on key pillars of capital: financial, manufacturing, intellectual and human capital, social and natural capital. This, I would say, has really brought, this very, very important parameter of sustainability under the sun. And, just to put one word from us operations guys, what Deeksha seems to be, saying is that all the operation people now today are cognizant of all these parameters. And, just to borrow an oft-quoted phrase in these last 1.5 years, never let a good crisis go waste. These things which were considered as necessary evils are no longer there. They are strategic pillars of our annual planning process. So I would, probably bend more towards the side that it is there. It is, and also agree with Nawshir when he says that it is actually all regulatory measures are there. It is for the boards now to, really push this agenda forward and make the people accountable. Regulatorily, I think all the boxes are ticked. Back to you, Ravi.
Great, thanks, Saurabh. But I think we still may be in the minority. We pick the people who can speak about this. So, there are several other people who are just still grappling with this. And I know that given in the work that I do in several sectors. So let me come back to you, Deeksha, and ask you, because we also speak about the board and you are, the head of sustainability at the Aditya Birla Group. So how does the board work with you? Is there any interactions, regular or otherwise? Because there is, one of the very interesting case studies where Nike took cognizance of the fact that they were not being sustainable. There was a board member that was appointed to start discussions in this area. They worked with various executives in the company, senior management, to make this thing happen. So just wanted to get your thoughts on how your interactions, if any, with the board, and if there are any examples, success stories that you can share with us.
Thanks, Ravi. So how the board is, it is both ways. We are increasingly seeing that the board, both the independent as well as the executives now have understood the importance of looking at holistic performance. And one thing I want to talk about here is that it's very important to refrain from calling ESG as non-financial performance, because ESG is your holistic performance. If somebody's, if there's an investment that somebody's made into your business or a project, or if somebody's lent you money for a project and you do not give them returns the way it had been envisaged, it's a governance issue. So it gets covered in G. If you've not, not understood how there could be a waste coming out of your manufacturing process and done something about it, it's an E issue. If you are not recognizing how you are dealing with people, whether it's your own people, so it's your employees, whether it's people who work for you and with you. So in a way, ESG covers all of this. And this understanding is now clearly there in larger businesses with the board. And to be able to work, and some of the things have the law provides for it. For example, many of the some of the G for the S aspects, like say labor rights. So through the committees, there are board committees who look at whether you've addressed issues like that. Having sustainability committee which supports the board. There are now in our businesses the apex level committees which discuss, for example, the issues of safety, the issues of occupational health, the issues of environment, etc. They're all being discussed, and the key projects that we are taking around them. And then, of course, about the overall, some of our large companies have taken public ESG targets, whether it's around decarbonization or to say we will, zero waste to landfill by a certain year, or it is about reduction in freshwater consumption. So if as a public listed companies, you're taking those targets, there are committees in which the roadmaps to meet those targets, progress against those is discussed. So I hope that in a way answers the question.
Yeah, go ahead, Nawshir.
Ravi, I just want to say, every 3 months a board sits down and makes the CFO stand in front of it and spend about half an hour, 45 minutes explaining the financial performance. I'd like to see the day when every 3 months a board sits down and asks the Chief Sustainability Officer to demonstrate the sustainability performance of the company. That is when sustainability is in the minds of the board, not a sort of ritualistic, let's discuss ESG once a year and you spend half an hour or something.
Nawshir, it happens monthly, not with this thing. And the Chief Sustainability Officer of a company, in true sense, is the managing director of the company. Because if it is the ESG aspects, then only the CEO or the MD has a view on what his or her head of procurement is doing on supplier sustainability, what his head of marketing or sales is doing listening into customers and responding to customers' demands. So, and which is why when Ravi said, what does a Chief Sustainability Officer do? Chief Sustainability Officer provides this thing to say, is everybody taking cognizance of what all holistically they need to do? So head of procurement is not just making sure that the supply of raw material is coming to you at the cheapest cost, but also recognizing, to Saurabh's point of taking cognizance of what all are the risks that exist in my supply chain and am I addressing them? That is sustainability. To just link it to say CSO will have this ritualistic meeting, it's not about that. Let's not generalize this thing. And by the way, also to your point, Mother Earth has taken very good care of itself. Corporate's function is not to take care of, through COVID you saw, Mother Earth does not need people like us. We have to worry about our own sustainability. One of my favorite things to talk about in sustainability is whose sustainability are we talking about? It's definitely not of the planet. Planet is very sustainable. We have to become sustainable.
Thanks, Deeksha.
I think the real issue is the company taking care. The topic before us is the board's role in sustainability. And how much is it in the board's mind space? That's why I say, just as much as financial performance is in the board's mind space, so should sustainability be in the board's mind space, not in the mind space of executive. That's the point I'm making.
Thanks, Nawshir. Great points, guys. So I want to move into another aspect of it. I know we will not do justice in 1 hour for this very important topic, but I do want to talk about this primarily because sustainability discussions also open the idea not just to continue the business goals, but also open up opportunities for innovation. And there have been instances where given the new constraints, the new dynamics, you actually are challenged to innovate. So I just wanted to pose this question to Saurabh. Innovation and digitalization has become important opportunities for sustainability initiatives. How has it played out in your company?
So, Ravi, again, a very interesting question. And it's interesting that you say this because, despite the horrific consequences this pandemic has brought upon us, I often, discuss with my team that the I and the D in the COVID actually stands for innovation and digitization, because, the way it's given a fillip to digitization like no CIO or CIO could have done in its organization. Let me pick up a point, and Deeksha made a very important point that sustainability is becoming a part of how we are thinking. But mind you, it might not have started that way. And just let me pick up one example that you talked about. So the moment COVID came through, and Havells, as you know, some of you might know, we have a 20 product company. We are into electrical consumer durables, and after sales service is a very, very important part of our entire offering. Right. So the moment lockdown came in and, there was a complete lockdown on, even the call center. So call center couldn't take any calls and as well as our own service people could not go to, kind of service those, whatever faults, etc. Was there. Now, what was happening is all of a sudden because people were not, they had not stopped using appliances. In fact, if anything, they were using more, and hence more and more complaints were coming. Almost in a matter of weeks, we converted, most of the complaint resolution or complaint gathering mechanism to WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook, and later we launched even a chatbot. Even for servicing, we launched a lot of these, self-help videos, etc. for basic services, AC servicing, cleaning, if your mixer grinder was not work or fan has a noise, and those kind of stuff, videos, etc. What happened was, even today, when, relatively things are clear and almost 90% things, 95% are back on order, 24% of our customer calls are still continuing to come on the digital mechanism, right? So what it started off as a very simple, kind of a need of the hour kind of a solution, and look at the less number of people using their bikes and going for repairs, etc. Customers not having to waste time. So time is being saved, money is being saved, resources are being saved, right? But it did not start off that way, and hence a tremendous impact on sustainability. If I can squeeze in just one more example, the moment, we shut down once again, we have a huge sales manpower of almost sales personnel of about 2,900 people. For a salesperson to just feel that, nothing to do and you have no place to go, because his work is very relationship oriented. He has to talk to people. He has to meet people. Again, in a matter of weeks, we got, several training programs organized. And within that, period of about 4 to 5 months where, partial opening, etc. were happening, we did 10,000 man hours of training on the system on various, Zoom and, Microsoft Teams, etc. Even now, when again the pandemic is over, almost 80% of our our trainings happen on systems, which used to travel for people coming from headquarter locations to regional offices or to main offices, etc. All that is gone, right? So it's making commercial sense, and yes, definitely it's making a lot of sustainability sense. So this is presented when a business head presents this, he presents kind of not as a sustainability kind of an issue, but sustainability is a very, very wonderful consequence of what we started off with. Probably, that should bring in some kind of a, semblance between the two functions, which are oft seen as, contradictory to each other.
Great. Thanks, Saurabh. Also, I think, Saurabh, when you and I discussed separately, you also talked about various product innovations that have actually been spurred on through such constraints during the pandemic. And they now continue to become new product lines, as you come out. Well, we haven't come out of the pandemic yet, but as we come out of the pandemic, I think that those are new product lines that you are introducing as well. So great.
Right. People started thinking in a completely new dimension altogether, which was not thought as. But it's kind of sustaining that, and good percentage of our revenues continue to come from those kind of product categories.
Wonderful. So I'll post the last question to Nawshir, and then we'll open it up to the audience. I believe there are some questions coming in from the audience. So Nawshir, how do businesses now adopt the triple bottom line thought process? What are some of the early wins that you know of? Deeksha talked about some of those. Can you give us some examples that you have seen from the energy industry? Nawshir, you're on mute in case you're beginning to speak.
Sorry, yes. Thanks, Ravi. Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. Let me think. I think, first let me see what is the challenge here. There is a lot of new technology in the sustainability space. And the challenge every board faces that I have sat on is which of those technologies should you pick? Take energy storage. I used to be on the board, as I said, of a battery company. There are many energy storage technologies today, liquid salt, all sorts of strange things which I have no comprehension of. The challenge for the company and the board is which of those are likely to eventually succeed. Take generation of power. We have got the regular solar PV cells, but there are paints on walls which are supposed to generate electricity. Electricity is generated now by extracting the energy from vehicles driving on a road. So there are many, many technologies. These are all great laboratory inventions. The challenge is how financially and even technically feasible are they in the real world. And let me give you some examples out of the company I am now on, Thermax. I've been on the board for more than 10 years, Thermax. And I think Thermax has done a lot of its own research, and its research is broadly in two areas. The company itself is, I would describe it as essentially an expert in handling heat. So what are the two areas of their main thrusts of their development? The first thrust of development is how do we harness waste heat at lower and lower temperatures? Because it is easy to use waste heat when it is at 500 or 400 degrees Celsius. But how do you use waste heat at a far lower temperature? Because that is a technical challenge, something I don't comprehend. So that is one challenge. And they have, for example, invented a method by which the heat in the exhaust of a vehicle can be harnessed to work its air conditioning. Now, this reduces fuel consumption by about 8%. So this doesn't work in a car or a small vehicle, but certainly in a bus, it's a successful device. It's been accepted by the German regulator, and we will see perhaps more of those. Unfortunately for Thermax, most buses are now switching to being electrically and battery driven. So the device is not of any use in those. But there is still many years before all diesel buses are put out of business. So for that, this is one illustration of using heat at lower temperatures, waste heat at lower temperatures. The other major thrust is how do you make fuels that cannot normally be burnt in a boiler? How do you invent boilers that can burn such challenging fuels? To give you two examples, which Thermax has been able to successfully handle, Nestle, when it makes its instant coffee, is left with thousands of tons of, I think they're called coffee grinds. Now, this is damp material which is almost impossible to burn in a boiler. They've been able to invent a boiler to combust those grinds and therefore extract the heat out of those. So this is biomass. Or when you extract oil out of palm oil kernels, the residue that remains, again, very, very difficult to burn. They are not easy to burn. So they've invented boilers that can burn those residues. So there are great successes. Companies which have been working, doing their own research, or more than even their research, essentially it's development. Because the research bit is a challenge unless you are a very large company, you're well funded, and you take an enormous risk. So Thermax is not a company of that size, which will, but it's certainly with over 50 years of experience of burning material and handling heat, they develop on that knowledge and therefore come up with these different kinds of inventions. So I think in a summary, Ravi, I'll leave some time for questions. So this is what I would put as the successes.
We have a couple of really interesting questions. Maybe some of them are loaded, so we might have to watch out for that as well. So one of them is, does board have a strategy to communicate back to the consumer? What is the sustainability cost to the consumer in the overall cost of goods, thereby increasing consumer awareness? Say, for example, I buy this footwear, you have saved 8 trees. I mean, how would I know that? If I don't know it, why would I buy it and why would I pay for it? You know, that's something. Does the board and the management, is it thinking about it every day? Is the question. This is one of the questions we have here. It's for everybody, you know.
Yeah, I just want that, Shrikant. You know, restaurants have started writing on their menus the number of calories in a serving. So the question really is, if restaurants are writing the calories, why can't I buy a pair of shoes and I know what's the carbon footprint, which requires Scope 3 measurement, which really takes the cradle to grave carbon impact of the pair of shoes that I want to purchase. And I think today we still don't have the information to be able to put that kind of knowledge before customers. But it's a great question, and this is what customers should start demanding. Because if they demand it, like the restaurants, they will start putting the information out. But if there's no demand, no board's going to use its energies to come up with this information.
Thanks, Nawshir. Deeksha, you had a comment?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very interesting question, and that's also something that industry is very aware of, and I can give example from our textile value chain. As Aditya Birla Group, we are in all parts of textile value chain, whether it's, we make different kinds of fibers, viscose, linen. We also make fabric, and then we make apparel as Aditya Birla Fashion and Retail. And in all of these, we work with different platforms who are looking at coming out with information such as what has just been raised. One example being working with Sustainable Apparel Coalition, which brings together the different players in the textile, or as the name suggests, apparel value chain, and Nike is one of the founding members of Sustainable Apparel Coalition, is what is called a Higgs score. So that Higgs score on a garment would tell you all this information, what all in terms of different types of EHS performance, in terms of transparency, where did your fiber come from? So whether it's Sustainable Apparel Coalition, Fashion for Good, where we work, that is a platform where we work with different startups on innovations that could be happening. As Birla Cellulose, we've introduced this whole concept of tracer, where through that information you can actually see from which forest did that pulp come, that wood and pulp came from. So there is a lot of this thing. But having said that, are consumers also ready to therefore pay the price for, because there are no free lunches. It does cost more to be able to do all of this. So I think it goes hand in hand. If you will ask for more information, you will get, and then you pay. But that recognition is there, and work is happening.
Yeah. I have one more question, actually. This is a really loaded one. We know the future is we know the future is obviously perilous if carbon emissions are not reduced. Do we need a refresh of the boardroom itself? Do we need a new team? And does the management need to think differently? Or will we be massacred by companies like Tesla that displace the giant motor companies? So do we need a refresh itself in the boardroom? I mean, do we have the right board? Is a question that's being asked. I mean, what is your take on it? I mean, any one of you, four of you can take this question because it's really loaded, I guess. Yeah.
Srikanth, I think there are, if I look at the boards I have sat on, there are individuals in the board who are very sensitive to this. You can see I myself am an individual of that kind. The challenge is that acceptable? Because if you saw the responses of everybody, what Deeksha said, what Saurabh said, and what I myself said, we are still addressing the requirements of our shareholders, our investors, our lenders, and eventually that is money related. And whether it's related to the total amount, how many kilograms or grams of carbon was generated. When I bought this shirt out of the Aditya Birla group, taking it right from how many grams of carbon went into the fertilizer that was used in the fields to grow the cotton, or how many went into the chemicals, the pesticides that was sprayed in the field. And when you add it all up and get the scope 3 number, I would then choose a shirt saying, I won't buy this one, I'll buy an Aditya Birla one because it's 8 grams less of carbon than some competing shirt. We don't have that kind of information. And so I think having directors, yes, I think we need, but do we need Greta Thunberg in our boardroom? I would love to have her, but whether we would be able to handle her is the challenge.
So, Saurabh, you had some comments?
Yeah, just a small comment that possibly we are putting a lot more, onus of the whole thing to the board members. My thought would be executive body of the company, is getting smarter, and possibly, I personally don't feel that it costs much to give, sustainability. I think it is, the ingenuity and the, innovation that has to be put on super premium. And that is what will solve problems for us. And once we as executives start presenting it to the board, and also mind you, the consumer also need to start demanding. They have, right now, most of the onus is on the manufacturers, etc., to take care of whatever sustainability issues are there. The consumer also need to play its part in the whole value chain. And once ingenuity and executives start presenting it, I think, the entire ecosystem should come around, and I certainly don't believe that it will cost us a lot more.
Yes, we are run out of time, and you have
Ravi, I would like you to probably end with a closing note, and thank you all. Really appreciate your time. Yeah. Good.
Great. So thank you very much to all the panelists. I think this is the beginning of a journey that a lot of us in the audience are going through. One, it was the startup audience that we have are looking to form a board in the first place, and then figuring out what's the best way to govern. And that's what's happening. And suddenly we throw in the next piece, which is governance with a trusteeship, which is much larger than just governance for the financial goals. So all of this put together, I think there's a lot that needs to be done. I hope we have left you with some insights on this particular topic, and would love to see you take this thing on, with both your hands and move the conversations to a next level in the boardrooms. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.